Greetings, my friends, and welcome back to the Home Slice. Today we have the last episode where I will intro new blades in my mid-size knives tournament. There's been a lot of twists and turns and surprises for me, and I've really enjoyed demoing these different blades. But today we have the Kershaw Iridium. The Kershaw Iridium was on a really good Blade HQ sale, and I liked the look of it. I was like, oh wow, it's got some cool sculpted lines, sort of technical feel to it. It's got a interesting sort of modern fuller, a really wide fuller that's kind of square edged, and it allows you to kind of open it with your thumb or reverse flick it if you, I'm not quite good at that yet, but there you go. It's got a stainless steel frame lock and some anodized hardware, some anodized aluminum probably hardware. And it's a nice little knife. It's in D2 steel, and I thought it would be interesting to try Kershaw's D2 steel. D2 coming in at a 5 out of 10 in edge retention in Dr. Laren Thomas's steel ratings. And I'd like to try it against some CPM MagnaCut. So this is the Hogue Deka, cheapest MagnaCut you could get for a long time, maybe still. And they've got a decent little crossbar lock. It's like a Benchmade Axis lock. It's just a bit more sticky. And I think the Benchmade Axis lock feels a little bit more thoroughly thought through, and the fit and finish is a little bit better on them as a mechanism. I've heard good things about Kaiser though, that they do really good with the clutch lock, and there's a lot of companies doing these now, so we'll get varying levels of quality. This Hogue one is a little bit sticky, but it's gonna provide all of the strength and functionality that Axis locks are famous for. And CPM MagnaCut in Dr. Laren Thomas's testing also gets a 5 out of 10 for edge retention. And so these two have identical edge retention as tested. They're both real nice clip point design and real nice sculpted handles. They both feel quite good in the hand, although the Hogue has a few more sharp edges, and I've not been a fan of nylon in the past. So I'm sort of giving this a try to see if my feelings have changed about nylon, or if I can be persuaded to take on nylon because of CPM MagnaCut. This will be the first MagnaCut that I've ever tested, and I definitely have grown in appreciation for lightweight nylon over the years, because if you have just a work knife that you don't want to have to worry about kind of banging around, or that cleans out really well, nylon's a pretty good material for that. It doesn't rust. Something I do have to say just out of the gate real quick is that this Kershaw has been in storage, and so has this MagnaCut, and obviously the MagnaCut blade is spotless, not a hint of rust, corrosion, or anything else, but it's quite humid here in New Zealand, and the blade of this Kershaw Iridium, and indeed also the handle with this bead blasted or glass blasted finish, are both showing little dots and signs of rust and patina and corrosion just from being in storage. So that's definitely a benefit you get out of nylon and MagnaCut. You don't have to worry about that stuff. So essentially this episode, I've got two steels. On paper, the edge retention is exactly the same. The toughness is higher in MagnaCut, so I've gone to this edge, taken the sharpening stone and ground some reliefs off so that the edge is a little bit thinner to sort of utilize that toughness. And I'd like to see, like, hey, do you really get the same edge retention from MagnaCut and D2, or because of the toughness, if you reprofile the edge a little bit, is the feeling of edge retention better on some of these tougher steels? I just did one that was D2 versus 3V, and they felt sort of the same. So it'll be interesting to see if you can actually feel any difference with this MagnaCut. And I think it's also quite an interesting thing because, you know, this knife, I think I paid $130 US for, and this knife I paid around $30 US for on sale. I think normally it's about 50 or 60. So this is more than twice on any given day the price of a knife like this. And this one I actually paid, more like a fourth of the price, a fourth of the money for. So it'll be an interesting analysis to see, like, well, the edge retention says it's the same, but does it seem worth it, the leap from here to here in my actual use? Or does the performance rely more on things like good design and the details of the knife setup and the heat treatment? We will see. I'll cut over now to the details and measurements that I care about on these knives. We'll go through some glamour shots, and then I'll be carrying these and come back to you after a couple weeks with my thoughts. Took these tests blind, so I'm taking a look for the first time. My guess would be Kershaw Iridium 200 grams, Hogue Deka 150. Oh, that's pretty close. Keep in mind that these tests are sped up 4 times. You got to do your best slow for it to be authentic, guys. Don't cheat on your best machine. So I'm a little under on both. Oh, look at that, 212, 233. In the last test where D2 sort of turned the tables on me, and unexpectedly the design of this QSP Parrot sort of shined through, and the edge retention lasted really well on that D2. I've had sort of the opposite experience with this series, where I'm not going to necessarily make judgment calls that I know where the problem lies, but I did not have as good of an experience with this D2 in the Kershaw Iridium. Let's start with the Iridium, and I'll give sort of my pros and cons. This Kershaw Iridium, they really nailed the aesthetic. Like, the thing just looks really cool. It's very comfy in the hand. I personally like a thin and small handle with sort of a big index finger groove. So this is sort of my jam. I like when it sort of leans your knife forward a little bit. I am finding in this series something that I was not as aware of in the past. But when it comes to folding knives, if you draw a line down the midline of the knife, I really, really like, in a folding knife in particular, for the tip to be below that midpoint. And this one didn't quite hit it for me. And this is not the first time this has happened to me in these EDC tournaments. And so I'm beginning to be like, you know what? This really is a value for me that changes my perception of the knife. The other things that I have to say on the con side for the Kershaw Iridium is that the edge did feel kind of thick, and I'm not sure if it was overheated in the factory or what, but the edge retention out of the gate was not very good. I went back actually during the week because I didn't want to give it a bad review unfairly, and 2 different times I tried grinding away a bit of material from the edge to see if I could refresh it or see if I could try a different edge finish, because I really didn't want to unfairly say, hey, this didn't do so well. And what I found is actually the same thing as I found on the Kaiser original. In fact, the experience overall was very, very similar to the experience that I had with the Kaiser original. The experience being that the only finish that worked really well on it was a cloudy finish, and you needed to do a couple sharpening sessions to actually bring the good performance out of the steel. So I ended up with a 400 grit, I believe, Veneve diamond waterstone finish on this, and that was cutting okay. It was doing pretty well, but I really had to work to get it there. The other thing that I have to say as a con is I love this bead blasted or glass blasted finish. Overall, I really like the accents of blue on this knife. They're really, really cool. It's a very attractive looking knife, and Kershaw really nails their slimness, and their carry footprint is amazing, and the look of the thing is really sweet. But I do have to say, I don't know if it's picking up on the video, but I did some yard work with it. I was cutting some flax stalks, not the blades or the leaves, but the stalks, and some of the juice got left on it, and there's actually quite a bit of patina that formed along the blade there. And that's not unexpected with D2. I think what's unexpected is that the QSP did the same job and didn't actually discolor at all. And so the difference between sort of a satin or almost semi-gloss finish on the QSP and the bead blasted one on this Kershaw is very different in terms of rust resistance. I had some rust form in the stainless steel handles and some rust spots form in the blade of this one. I've coated it in oil now because somebody's spoken for it and wants to buy it from me, but I don't want it to do any more color changing before I get it into their hands. So those are kind of the cons. Pros of this thing are the action is really satisfying. The sound that it makes when it comes out is really fun. It's like shonk. And it's a really nice sort of engagement sound for the frame lock. I like the frame lock. I like the stop on the frame lock. It sort of keeps you from pushing your fingers on that and making it really hard to open, which happens with some frame locks. So I like that you have sort of, wrong finger, you have sort of space to get your reverse flick in there. Beautiful reverse flick, very fidgety, this knife. I fidgeted with it all the time. It's a very fun design if you like fidgety stuff. I love the jimping coming way forward, but the geometry, the edge retention, the rust resistance, all these things came together with the sort of, in my opinion, high tip that makes it hard to kind of contact on a cutting board and use that area, or you just end up with quite a lot of wrist bend to accomplish it. They sort of came together to sort of drag down my experience on this, although I like the knife in terms of the design. And if you were really committed to the design, I'm sure you could try some different sharpening stones and get some decent edge life out of it. That is contrasted with the fact that this Hogue Deka is such a no-nonsense, lightweight, just blast through whatever work knife that's actually thin enough to be quite satisfying in the kitchen. The edge is not that thin, but actually with the sort of thin blade stock, it creates this sort of thin overall profile that was really pleasing in a lot of tasks. I really like the grip characteristics. This handle has felt really comfortable to me and quite secure with the nylon shaping. The edges are a little bit sharp, as I think Pete and many other people have alluded to. There is a lot of hardware in here, I think, as Nick Shabazz sort of alluded to, and it is quite a flexible material. At the moment, I'm kind of at the point where I'm like, I like this MagnaCut blade enough, and I like having a work knife that didn't cost like hundreds of dollars that still has MagnaCut steel in it. That I probably, if they began to bug me, which they haven't too much, I kind of dislike nylon, but this has been a pleasant experience of nylon, like in the upper sort of echelons of my experiences of nylon handles. So if it began to bug me that there's a lot of flex or whatever, I probably would just get some aftermarket micarta scales for this thing. I think overall, the edge retained amazing aggression. Like, I was cutting up cardboard boxes, and cardboard, like especially these banana boxes that I break down from time to time, will kill your fine edge so fast. And I checked it, I'm not sure if it still is. Yeah, it's still shaving, like some scattered hairs. It's not clean shaving anymore. But after cutting up a bunch of cardboard, the first time, I've done it 2 or 3 times to start fires, it was still shaving. And I was like, what? For a stainless steel, that is very unusual. Oh, it is. There's just an area where it's still shaving. I have to say, I really, really like MagnaCut. I know I'm going to sound like a fanboy. I don't even know. I don't get on YouTube myself like almost ever, so I don't even know what the current vibe is with MagnaCut. But I have to say, this is what I wanted it to be. As for those of you who saw my steel geek out video, you know that I was following Larry Thomas's work, and I wanted somebody to make a steel with a good amount of vanadium and 1% or so carbon and 10% chrome. I wanted to do it myself. So when Laren came out with this, initially I was like, oh no, like I wanted to do that. But then I was like, Gabe, you're never going to do that. And just be glad that he made your dream steel with all, like in every spec. Like I looked at the composition and I was like, that's what I would have wanted to do within like 10%. And so it's uniquely exciting for me to get to try it. I know this isn't the most well-hardened specimen, but the dual grit edge on this 61 Rockwell MagnaCut is a thing of beauty. I have to give a disclaimer that you do need to take it to an unloaded strop every now and then because it's such a flexible steel with such a big dual grit edge that I found I would cut stuff up and it was like, oh, I've got a little bit of edge bend there. And I would just take that back to the unloaded kangaroo. I would use an unloaded hanging kangaroo strop and just give it 10 good passes on the fine side of that. And it'd realign that edge without ripping the dual grit extension off of it. And you would be right back to that just zippy, like keen edge that you sort of originally had so quickly, so many times. And I have to say, I have tried that. I tried that on this Kershaw Iridium, and it did not work. There are steels that don't strop back very well. And the thing that I had hoped that MagnaCut would be is like a mostly all-purpose replacement for things like S30V. My experience with S30V is, especially when I was working with some of like Benchmade's old heat treatment on the stuff, it was so difficult to get it to a really fine edge. It was so difficult to get it to hold that grab sometimes that I would go back to my like CPM M4 and these more carbon steel type knives, and it's like, man, these just hold the keen edge, like not your like semi unpleasant working edge, but your like semi glorious working edge. I don't know how to describe it. That's so ridiculous. But I wanted a stainless steel that would do that. That would do what your 3V, your 4V, your M4, your carbony or lower chrome content, like less stainless sort of steels do, where they take this really keen edge and then you can like bring it back to that again and again and again. I have these experiences with S35VN and S30V in particular, to some extent with M390 as well, that it's hard to strop them back. It's hard to get them to that really, really fine edge unless you have a specimen with excellent heat treat and a really thin edge. And my experience was that you just wouldn't get that beautiful initial edge and that strop back qualities that I would get from like my Spyderco Military in M4. So the reason I was excited about MagnaCut steel is not because it's going to be perfect, but because that balance of hardness, carbon content, carbide, vanadium carbide amount, vanadium carbide distribution, where they're sort of separated in the steel and individual, but they still hold the edge in that nice rigid way that a powder steel does. I was hoping that this would feel like one of those steels that I loved that would come back again and again and get super fine. And I have to say, my first impression is that Laren Thomas has done it. My first impression is this is the stainless steel that I hoped that it would be. Does the edge last forever? No. Is this edge going to outlast my QSP Parrot that I loved in D2 by miles and miles and miles? I don't know. Like, we'll see over time. Maybe the dual grit characteristics work better on CPM MagnaCut than they do on D2. But is this the steel that I hoped it would be? Yes. And I noticed that I was worried after this thing patinaed. I was like, oh, I don't want to do necessarily everything with it because I kind of want to sell it eventually after. It is so worry-free to have MagnaCut. It's so stainless. And I found for me that it has the edge that I had hoped it would have. Even in this Hogue, which I know people have been down sometimes on Hogue or other makers for doing a softer heat treatment. And this is an early Hogue Deka. Like, I bought it when they first came out. It's probably sitting between 60 and 61 Rockwell, maybe 62 if you're lucky. And I've got some more specimens in higher hardness that I will check out. And they might blow this out of the water so much that I get rid of the Deka. But I have to say, for this test, Deka wins over Iridium. If it was a fashion show, the Iridium might have it. But I like the aesthetic of this Hogue. Elishewitz has done an awesome job. I love the swedge. The blade height's sufficient. The grip feels great. I actually really like this jimping. This is some of the better done jimping that I've experienced. I don't mind the sharp corners on the axis lock and thumb stud. Some people will take issue with that, but I kind of like to be able to grab your axis lock with one finger and flick it in, and I personally don't mind it at all. I think overall, I'm realizing that I like crossbar locks a little bit better than button locks. And the reason is I take these things out like landscaping, gardening, the dirt gets in there, you know? And I have more confidence in an axis lock or a crossbar style lock. I can't remember what Hogue calls theirs, but I have more confidence in this style of lock holding up to dirt, sand, and abuse than I do with a button lock, although the action of a button lock is admittedly better, especially on the reverse flick. The reverse flick is not as nice on this as like the Kaiser original, but I like the confidence you feel when you launch it out with your thumb. Like a crossbar style lock, just sort of shunk, that bolt comes in and you feel it engage and it's like rock solid. I think, in my opinion, the crossbar style lock is probably the best bang for your buck in terms of a high lock strength that's still fun and you can like fidget with and operates really smoothly. I did find that like closing it is a little bit harder than on the button locks, and a button lock is going to be smoother. So if you've got an EDC that you're never going to expose to the inglorious activities of like cutting giant weeds out from the dirt or whatever, then you might be fine with a button lock. For me, crossbar lock is just a little closer to my jam because I'm confident in the strength of it. It has enough fidget factor, but it feels really confidence building in the hand, the way that it engages. And also the way that it closes. It's got a long way that the detent sort of starts to engage. So when you're flicking it closed, it's not as likely to bounce back out, which I have a problem with button locks at times bouncing back out, especially if they're really smooth. So there's the minutia. Maybe you guys didn't want all of that information, but I figured you put some MagnaCut on the screen, or you have some of the best budget MagnaCut that has existed in the last, 2 or 3 years previous, and you guys might want to hear my full thoughts on the Deka. It wins this leg of the tournament over the Kershaw Iridium. And I love MagnaCut. Thanks, Laren. You're the man. And if you want to see the last episode of this series, the link will be on screen now. For the rest of you guys, I'll say peace out from the home slice. Stay sharp.